So today we're really going beyond like the whole typical view of the body, just like muscles and bones, that kind of thing. We're going to look at the body as this vessel of energy and consciousness.
Right, like a whole different perspective.
Exactly. And we're exploring this through the teachings of this 15th century Indian mystic poet, Kabir. Have you heard of him?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So we're diving into the excerpts that you provided from Anurag's Sagar Ocean of Love.
Yes. And what's so fascinating about this text is that it's not your typical anatomy book. It's like it gives you this roadmap to like the cosmos, but the cosmos within us.
And he actually calls this the lotus body, right?
Yeah, the lotus body.
So instead of just thinking flesh and blood, we're talking about this vibrant garden, like filled with all these luminous flowers. And these flowers are the chakras.
Exactly.
Okay. So for someone who's like, wait, hold on, chakras, what are those?
So each chakra is like this energy center, right? Mm-hmm. Each one kind of pulsates with a very specific frequency. They have a certain number of petals, and some even have deities that reside in them.
Okay, it's getting really interesting. So these chakras are not just random energy centers. There's a system.
Oh, yeah, there's a whole system. And it's a system that really connects us to our very essence, like our soul and its journey.
Okay. That's a lot to take in, but I'm intrigued.
It's a lot, but it's fascinating.
So let's start exploring. If we were to take a tour of this internal lotus garden, where do we begin?
We always begin at the base, right? So we start at the base of the spine, and there we find the Muladhara chakra, a four-petaled lotus.
4 petals. Oh, cool.
4 petals, and it's associated with Ganesha.
Oh, Ganesha, the remover of obstacles, right? I love that. So is now what this chakra is all about, like clearing obstacles in our lives?
Well, think of it like this. It's our foundation, just like roots anchor a tree, right? So the Muladhara, it connects us to the earth. It governs our basic needs, like feeling safe and secure in the world. When this chakra is balanced, that's when we feel really grounded and supported.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So if we continue upwards through this garden, what's next? What's the next stop on our tour?
Okay, so as we move up, we encounter the Swadhisthana chakra. And that's a 6-petaled lotus that resides in the pelvic region.
Okay, 6 petals this time.
6 petals. And this one's associated with Brahma, the creator.
Creation, Brahma. Does that mean this chakra is about our creative energy?
Exactly. It's the center of creation. It's about our sensuality, the flow of life force, how we connect with our emotions, experience pleasure, like bringing new things into the world.
Wow. So we've grounded ourselves, tapped into our creativity. What comes after that as we continue up the spine?
We then arrive at the Manipura chakra, which is an 8-petaled lotus, and you can find that at the solar plexus.
Okay.
And this one is connected to Vishnu, the preserver.
Vishnu? That feels powerful. What kind of energy are we talking about with this chakra?
Well, think about the sun, how much energy it radiates.
Okay, yeah.
It's the same with Manipura. It's about willpower, your personal power, transformation, taking action.
It's about like stepping into our power.
Exactly. Making things happen.
Okay, I like that. So we've gone from the grounding energy to the creative energy to this powerful solar plexus energy. And now, where are we?
Now we're moving from that fiery energy to something a bit softer, but just as important, the heart center. Here we find the Anahata chakra, a 12-petaled lotus. This one's really interesting because it's linked to the unrivaled tone.
The heart center, the unrivaled tone. I'm really curious to hear more about this.
Well, Anahata is all about love, compassion, connection. Kabir actually says that this is where the soul experiences divine music, like the sound current of creation.
That's beautiful. So we've grounded ourselves, tapped into our creativity, stepped into our power, and opened our hearts. Where do we go from here?
We keep moving upward, and we come to the Vishuddha chakra. That's a 16-petaled lotus, and this one is at the throat.
16. Wow. Okay. And the throat, so that makes me think communication.
You got it. And this one's associated with Shakti, so the divine feminine energy.
Okay. So what does Kabir say about the Vishuddha chakra?
It's all about expression, communication, but more than that, it's about speaking your truth. Using your voice to share your unique gifts and connect authentically with others.
So after we found our voice, where does this exploration of the subtle body take us?
Finally, we arrive at the Ajna chakra, which is a 2-petaled lotus located between the eyes. It's often referred to as the third eye.
Ah, the third eye. The seat of intuition, right? So it feels like we've reached a whole other level of awareness at this point.
You could say that. It's that command center for intuition, wisdom, and the soul's connection to something bigger than ourselves.
Okay, but before we move on from the Ajna chakra, you mentioned something earlier about a subtle channel that runs between the eyes, the Sukamana or Sharag. What is that exactly?
Yeah, the sukmana. That's super important in all this. So it's seen as the pathway for the soul's journey and the connection to divine music, the shab. Kabir says that it's in this channel, the sukmana, that the four aspects of the mind reside.
Okay, hold on. Four aspects of the mind. What are they? That's where it gets a little, I don't know, complicated for me.
It sounds complicated, but it's actually pretty simple. Imagine a still lake, okay?
Okay, I can do that.
That's stillness. That's chit, pure consciousness.
Okay, got it. Pure consciousness.
Now imagine some ripples on that lake.
Okay, there are some ripples now.
Those ripples, that's manas, the active mind that's always receiving impressions from the world around us. And buddhi, that's the intellects, the part of us that analyzes, makes decisions, and navigates those ripples. And then, of course, there's ahankar, the ego, the part of us that creates that sense of separation, me versus you.
Oh, okay, so that's fascinating. All of that happening in this subtle channel. And I can see why Kabir describes the mind as a lake that's constantly being bombarded by impressions. It's that constant activity, right? It reminds me of, and correct me if I'm wrong, the concept of karma, how our thoughts and actions, they all create this ripple effect, kind of shaping the reality we experience.
You got it. Each ripple, each thought, word, deed, it all creates this cause and effect, right? But there's a little bit more to it than just that. Kabir introduces this concept of Niranjan.
Niranjan.
And you can think of Niranjan as this force that creates illusions.
Yeah.
It's like this veil over reality, preventing us from seeing clearly.
Okay, so we're talking about illusion now.
Exactly.
This is where it gets really interesting.
It's like we're trapped, right? But instead of seeing the bars, we just see these reflections.
You're mistaking those shadows for the real deal.
Exactly. And Kabir uses this analogy of a soul trapped in a cage that's mistaking those reflections for the real thing.
I can see it.
Like a parrot, you know?
Oh, fixated on its own reflection.
Exactly. Unable to see the vastness beyond the bars.
Okay, that's a powerful image. And this is where that idea of the unrighteous name comes in, right? It's like we're reaching for something, but we're grasping at this like distorted version of the truth.
Yeah, like a faint echo instead of that original powerful sound.
Instead of the real thing.
And Kabir contrasts this with the true name, which can only be accessed through connecting with the Satguru.
The Satguru, the true spiritual guide. So it makes you think, right, who or what are we giving our attention to? Because that shapes how we understand everything. It's like we can get so caught up in those surface level distractions that we totally miss the deeper currents underneath.
Totally. And Kabir's exploration of the body, it goes beyond just these energy centers. He also talks about the physical elements like blood, hair, even breath, and connects them back to spiritual understanding.
So we're going from the cosmos inside to something a bit more, I don't know, tangible.
Yeah, it's like he's saying that everything is connected.
But how? How does he connect them to those chakras we were talking about?
Well, remember the shabd, that divine sound current. Kabir says, when that shabd manifests within us, it reveals the true nature of the chakras.
Okay.
And he uses all those physical details to illustrate how it works.
Give us an example. I'm really curious to hear this.
Okay, so for example, he describes how the body is formed from blood, right?
Yeah.
And adorned with millions of hairs. And he reminds us that those things, they all originate from the earth.
So we're not separate from the physical world.
Exactly.
We're literally made up of the earth's element.
And he goes even further, talking about the physical dimensions of the body in relation to this Shabed's influence. He'll say things like, the stomach is about 1.5 arm lengths, or the solar plexus, a 1/4 arm length.
So it's like he's creating this map of the body, but it goes beyond just the physical layout, right?
Right. He's showing how this subtle energy interacts with our physical form.
That's really cool.
And even the breath, he brings in the breath, saying that when it leaves the body, it reaches the sadhu, the true spiritual master.
Wow. So even something like breathing is tied into this spiritual journey. It makes you realize that even the things we totally take for granted, they might have this whole other level of significance.
Exactly. And Kabir really emphasizes that by practicing yoga. And he's not talking about the physical postures, but the path of inner awareness.
Okay, so inner yoga.
Exactly. It's how we can stay grounded in the physical world while also connecting to the divine. He actually calls it the yoga of true knowledge.
Yeah.
He says it's the abode of bliss.
The abode of bliss. I like that. But I'm also noticing this idea of illusion keeps coming up.
Right. It's central to his teachings. He wants us to see how easily we can be tricked by our own minds. Like, he even compares it to a puppeteer manipulating a monkey.
Okay, I think I see where you're going with this one. The puppeteer is the mind and we're the monkey.
Exactly. And he says, just as a puppeteer makes a monkey dance by various means, in the same way, The mind causes the soul to dance by constantly making it fall into the deep well of illusion.
So we're dancing to the tune of our thoughts and we don't even realize it.
Precisely. And Kabir says that it's only by connecting with the true Shab that we can actually break free.
From the puppeteer.
He says the true Shab eradicates the mind. But he also acknowledges that very few people, very few souls, truly recognize how deceptive their own minds can be.
So what does that even mean, to eradicate the mind? Are we talking about like silencing all thoughts completely?
It's not really about eliminating thoughts altogether, but shifting our relationship to them. Remember that lake analogy?
Yeah, like.
It's about calming those ripples, seeing the thoughts for what they are. Just these, fluctuations of energy, not getting swept away by every single one.
Okay, so it's about finding that stillness, that calm, even though everything around us is really active.
Exactly.
That makes a lot more sense.
And to really drive this point home, Kabir uses a bunch of really powerful analogies. He compares the soul trapped in this illusion to a parrot in a cage so focused on its reflection it doesn't even recognize itself.
Okay.
He also talks about a lion that mistakes its reflection for another lion.
Oh no.
Jumps into a mirror and loses its life. And then there's this image of dogs barking at their own echoes because they think it's other dogs.
Okay, those are some pretty intense images, but they definitely make the point. If we cling to this illusion, it's not going to end well.
It's going to create suffering. And Kabir reminds us that he's not just pointing out the problem, he's offering us the solution.
Which is?
Connecting with the true Shabbat.
Right, but how do we actually do that? How do we even begin to untangle ourselves from this web of illusion?
That's where the Satguru comes in,
Wow.
a true spiritual guide. Kabir says that while the jivas, the souls, they yearn for their true home, they can only return once they've met the Satguru.
So the Satguru is like this guide who helps us navigate all of those illusions.
Exactly, to reconnect us with our true nature. And he's saying we've become so accustomed to the, and I'm using his words here, nectar of illusion, that we've forgotten our true essence.
Mm-hmm.
He urges us to really listen to the, and again I'm quoting here, bandwidth of karma, to pay attention to how those thoughts and actions are actually creating the reality that we experience.
It's like tuning into the frequency of our own minds.
Exactly.
And seeing how we're contributing to the illusion, to the problem.
And that's how we break free. He says, by realizing the, quote, evil of illusion, the jiva, the individual soul, can then become the unique one.
That's a big statement. But it sounds challenging, to say the least.
Definitely.
Oh.
But he offers us this ray of hope with the image of a lamp. He says, on realizing him, one should become different from him taking the lamp of my shab. One who understands the difference will not be imprisoned by Yama. As long as the watchman is awake, the thief cannot do his work. In the same way, the souls are controlled by illusion and the thief performs his act.
So that lamp of the Shab, it's like a beacon of awareness, right? It's shining a light on those illusions so we can actually see them for what they are.
That's one way to look at it.
And as long as we stay vigilant, present, aware, like that watchman, we can prevent that thief of illusion from, robbing us of our true nature.
Exactly. But he reminds us that this illusion is powerful. He actually describes it as a, quote, well full of darkness, where Yama, the Lord of Death, is waiting to devour the soul through delusion.
Wow. It's like if we don't stay awake, we risk falling into this well and getting lost.
It's a reminder of what's at stake.
But it sounds like this journey that we're on, it requires us to stay awake.
To be present.
To be aware of those games our minds are constantly playing.
You got it. But it's not about being perfect. It's not about never getting caught in the illusion, right? It's about recognizing when we fall back into those old patterns and making the choice to reconnect with our true nature.
With the guidance of the Satguru and that light of the Shab.
Exactly.
This is a lot to take in, but I'm really feeling inspired to keep exploring these ideas.
That's the whole point.
Yeah.
These teachings are here to spark our curiosity and to encourage us to look a little deeper.
To look within. As we're going through this really deep dive into Kabir's ocean of love, it strikes me how this mystical view of the body is also really practical.
Totally.
It's not just philosophy, It feels like he's giving us this roadmap to actually understanding our place in everything.
And he gives you those details you
Yeah.
were talking about before. He's very specific about locations in the body.
Yeah.
Connects them to these familiar deities, right?
Right.
All to make these really subtle concepts I think, easier to grasp. He wants us to feel this.
To experience it.
To experience it, not just think about it.
Yeah, and one of the things that I find so intriguing, and we keep coming back to this, is this idea of the unique one.
Right.
This Sukhmana or Sharag that we were talking about. It sounds like this, I don't know, this hidden highway to a different level of consciousness, this subtle channel running between the eyes.
It's more than just anatomy. If
Yeah.
you connect it to everything else, it's the soul's pathway. The channel where that divine music, the shabd, can actually be heard.
So it's like the soul's own personal radio,
You could say that.
tuned into the frequency of the universe. That's so cool. And he actually talks about how the music changes as the soul ascends through different levels of consciousness.
Right.
There's a physical, the mental, the causal realms. Each one has its own vibration.
It gets more refined.
The music.
The music gets more refined, more beautiful as the soul progresses.
Oh, wow.
And then when it reaches that ultimate reality, Parbrahm, it's indescribable. Like this unfathomable volume of an unspeakable language.
Wow. A symphony of the soul. Okay, but you mentioned those different realms. Is that where the 5 elements come in? Fire, water, air, earth, ether. Those are the tattvas, right? They're not just like the building blocks of the physical world. They're part of our inner world, too.
And Kabir warns us about getting stuck in the realm of those elements if we haven't experienced that true name.
So we're mistaking those elements, like the ingredients for the meal itself. You can't really appreciate the symphony if you're focused on just, I don't know, the violins.
And he compares it to a child growing up.
Okay.
Someone without that experience of the true name in this life, or maybe even in previous lives, is like they haven't fully developed yet. They're clinging to these like less mature understandings.
So it sounds like the message is seek out that true source, the Satguru, the guide who can actually lead us beyond all of these illusions, these trips that our senses create.
Because we're surrounded by those illusions.
Yeah, we are.
And that question we were talking about before, right?
Yeah.
About finding that stillness and clarity in the Ajna chakra.
In the space between the eyes.
Where the mind, the soul, all of it hangs out. That's what Kabir's teachings, his imagery, his insights are all pointing towards. That's the journey.
And maybe that's the biggest takeaway from our deep dive today. The human body, as Kabir reveals it, is so much more than we think. It's this microcosm of like the entire universe. It's this vessel with incredible potential. And it's by exploring those subtle energies, tuning into that shabd, that divine sound current, that maybe, just maybe, we can unlock our own mysteries and begin to really understand what Kabir meant by the ocean of love.
And who knows what else we might discover along the way.
Exactly.